Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode in Caserta's Data Intelligence webinar series. And my name is Remy Rosenbaum, and I'm the VP of Marketing and Analytics at Caserta. And today we're going to talk about using healthcare data and analytics to improve patient outcomes. And we're not going to just focus on things that are going to be interesting for healthcare providers like hospitals and other providers, but also for life sciences and healthcare payers. So first, we're going to start with a story. This is Edward Marks, and he's the former CIO of the Cleveland Clinic. He's also a member of the National Duathlon team. And just a couple of months ago, at the Becker's Hospital Review Conference in Chicago, he shared how just mere months after experiencing a widowmaker heart attack during a national duathlon championship, he was diagnosed with severe prostate cancer. I mean, if that's not a lot, he credits his digital technology with saving his life in both instances. And this is what he had to say about it. He said that he believed his life was saved because they were able to diagnose him immediately, and he believed the quality of his life was enhanced because of the digital tools. Now, after his heart attack, Mr. Marks convinced his cardiologist, who Mr. Marks says was a little bit old school and not so hip on the technology, to take a digital-first approach to his healthcare. And using daily data reports from a smartwatch, Bluetooth blood pressure monitor, and heart patch, the cardiologist adjusted Mr. Marks' medication regimen on a near daily basis. And within just 6 weeks, Mr. Marks was running again. Now, that's a success story that all of us would love to hear. He goes on to say that he believes his life was saved because they were able to diagnose him. But then he says that we all need to be evangelists in our organizations to get these digital tools out and lead the way. He says to be that person who takes a bold stance and leads, volunteers, and takes chances and risks to bring digital tools and data-driven technologies to the medical practice, because otherwise we're only going to get incremental change. And at Caserta, not only are we evangelists for digital transformation, but it is our mission to improve the lives of others through data. So first, a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to get started. So Caserta is, if you don't already know, an end-to-end data and analytics services firm, not only for healthcare, but for all companies and organizations that need to become data-driven and extract value by and through their data. We help leaders solve their data and analytics challenges with the shortest time to value. And we help leaders get a competitive edge by helping them leverage data as an asset with analytic capabilities that enable your businesses to continually innovate and grow. We're made up of industry thought leaders. You see here our founder, Joe Caserta on the right, who founded Caserta back in 2001, and Doug Laney, who wrote the best-selling book Infonomics. Joe was the author of the best-selling Data Warehouse ETL Toolkit, which many of you have probably read. It's the standard for data warehousing and ETL till today. And we have some frameworks I'd like to share. Our frameworks help our clients with the fastest time to value, and that's what we're all about at Caserta. How do we get a project running to get the fastest time to insight for our clients? Here's a couple of our many frameworks which we developed that we have production hardened and use for our clients. We developed these in our own innovation lab. And focusing on healthcare, we're helping healthcare leaders do amazing things with data. Here are a couple of our notable healthcare clients. We have Moffitt, Humana, Metro Health, Centerlight, Windsor, NYC Health, VNA, and more. And that brings us to today's topic. Today I'm going to talk about the world of data-driven medicine and the proliferation of huge databases of clinical, imaging, omics, and molecular data are driving new biomedical discoveries and informing and enabling precision medical care. We can now use genomics data to craft personalized treatment regimens like that of Mr. Marks in order to improve patient outcomes and even extend lives. We're all on a data journey, and we're helping our clients get closer to their goals. So we're looking at here the digital healthcare delivery ecosystem. These are the players that are generating and ingesting data. And data from these sources are really what provide a more holistic, longitudinal view of a patient. No one source is complete, but when they're all combined, we can better understand how to care for a patient, what are a patient's needs, and how we can use this data in order to improve lives. So if we take a moment, the 4Vs of big data in healthcare, I wrote the 4Vs. Originally, the birth of big data, or the coining of the concept, is usually attributed to Doug Laney. That's the same Doug Laney who is our principal data analytics strategist. And this was back in 2001 in a meta-group report that was titled 3D Data Management, Controlling Data Volume, Velocity, and Variety. So here we also have volume, which is, data at rest, and then velocity, veracity, and variety. Now, in healthcare, we have to consider that the greater the variety and the greater the volume and the greater the velocity, the veracity becomes more in doubt. And we're not sure of how complete this data is, which in healthcare is a more serious matter because it could actually affect lives. These are our considerations when we have healthcare. These are our challenges that are preventing us from reaching our goals with data and analytics. Now, today we have more data in healthcare. Well, we have more data with everything, but especially in healthcare than ever before. This is not just internal data, but also external data in the world. Alternative data sources, third-party data sources, data from other healthcare providers, de-identified data, data sharing that a person does provide. And these together give us so many chances and opportunities for data-driven medicine. And historically, these have really been out of reach for healthcare organizations, such as, let's say, the social determinants of health consumer wellness and genomic profile data. But at the same time, most of you are probably asking yourselves, how do we bring in so many data sources into a single platform, into a single window pane, for stakeholders to make use of it, or perform advanced analytics on it, or power data-driven applications? Not only that, but if you guys take a look at the types of data, and both structured and unstructured data, that it's very challenging to bring all of these into the same window pane. A couple months back, I was in Fort Worth, Texas for a CDO conference, also about data-driven healthcare. And one CDO I met from a health organization said that she had, I believe it was more than 50 different types of formats for their electronic health records in their system. And that's mostly because of mergers and acquisitions over the years that they acquired. And so many different formats results just in a chaos of data governance issues, which they're still working on to solve. And the longer it takes to solve, the more the patient is really hurt in the end, because these are the insights which are being missed. And the healthcare data ecosystem is just growing. I mean, the amount of data is staggering, and it's only growing even more. Here's just an example of how much data and what data is growing. And data continues just to double at an enormous rate. If we look at the percentage of growth, this is estimated that it's increasing about 48% annually, and it's only growing. I mean, it's just an avalanche of new data, including clinical trials, electronic health records, like I said before, environmental data sources, data from devices that all of us are wearing or will be wearing. And all these data sources will be able to build predictive models about our health on an individual basis, not as a group, but as who each and every one of us are. How is Remy Rosenbaum's health as opposed to Mr. Smith's health? But at this point, it's no small feat knowing how to do this. And then we have to say the data evolved, but also the data analytics evolved. These are the questions that we're asking ourselves with this data. We started with what happened. This is information in hindsight. We're looking back at it. These are the reports that we're generating. These are the correlations that we're looking at. And we're saying, why did these things happen? Why did a given thing happen? Then we're moving on to predictive analytics. What will happen? Which people will be sick? How can we prevent it, right? That's kind of like forecasting for viruses, like the one we're having right now. Prescriptive analytics, how can we affect a given thing? How can we change this thing? How can it give us the insight we need in order to change it? And finally, self-learning analytics, which is basically artificial intelligence. This is interacting with the customer and the patient. But as most of us know, with all those different data sources and all those different formats, you can't do artificial intelligence without infrastructure for the analytics. So as I heard also once at a conference that I liked, you can't do AI without IA. And it is the infrastructure that many of us are lacking and continue to lack. So what are we going to do with all this data? I mean, we have a humongous amount of data. We have all these questions that we want to ask. What are we actually going to make use of? So first of all, the future of healthcare is hinged on data and analytics. We at Caserta all believe this, and it is through data and analytics that we're going to really continue to make the next leaps. Not only in the form of algorithmic diagnoses, but also in personalized treatment, like with Edward Marks. And if we look at how data is already helping healthcare orgs, we can see it's improving the patient outcome and quality of life, enhancing patient quality of care, and also boosting economic efficiency and financial performance. If we look at enhancing patient quality of care, we already have a client that they want to determine which of their patients have bed sores that need to be looked at by a professional. These are home-ridden people, and there are nurses that come and visit, but the nurse is unable to make this correct diagnosis. And so we're able to use technology and take pictures of the bed sores, feed it into a machine learning algorithm, and it'll say whether a doctor needs to look at it or not. And not only does this enhance the patient quality of care, but it also reduces costs and saves lives. So first we're going to talk about precision medicine. Now, all people are different, and we're moving away from one-size-fits-all medicine where everyone receives the same treatment over to more stratified medicine, where patients are grouped by disease subtypes, risk profiles, demographics, and other factors. I mean, gone are the days where it's just one-size-fits-all medicine, because each and every one of us is an individual, and each and every one of us has different needs. And these needs change both throughout our lives and also on a day-to-day basis. It could be environmental factors that are changing, socioeconomic factors that are changing, external pressures that we're not aware of, right? And in this type of model, that it moves from one size fits all to stratified, where people are grouped together on more precise levels, we can then use ever increasing accurate data to move on to precision medicine. And precision medicine is really the promise where each patient gets the right treatment that she needs at the intensity that she needs, exactly where she needs it, thus improving the response to a disease, but also reducing harmful side effects. It's like a heat-seeking missile that always hits the right target at the right time, instead of just going full-blown atomic bomb on an entire area and ruining everything. It's all about being precise with as little damage possible. And a lot of precision medicine has to do with the field of omics. Now, omics, like you probably hear from the word genome, is the study of information contained in an individual's genome and the biological derivatives of these genes. This includes the study of genes, gene expressions, proteins, metabolites, and lipids. And all of these are different types of data which we can use and populate into machine learning models in order to have a more precise and accurate treatment. Now, I'm actually going to show you all a video really quickly, and please forgive me if this doesn't work, and if this doesn't, I want you to answer in the questions panel on your right, because I've actually never done this before in a webinar. I'm going to share a video with you about one of our clients, Moffitt, in Tampa, Florida.
For many, the sound of erasers clapping and the sight of equations on the blackboard may conjure up childhood memories of math class. But for Dr. Alexander Anderson, this may be the cure for cancer.
We're trying to use mathematical models to predict how a tumor grows and spreads in a patient.
Dr. Anderson is a mathematical oncologist at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida, the only cancer center in the world to house an entire mathematical department.
You know, mathematics classically has a bad rap. as being something that's not applicable to the real world. But the reality of it is that mathematics is the language of life.
And life is exactly what's on the line when Dr. Anderson sets about solving the problem in front of him.
The things that's really cool about mathematical models is that I can run many different treatment scenarios through a mathematical model without ever applying them to a patient. So it's really a way to kind of predict the future based on the current state of the patient.
Dr. Anderson believes these models will ultimately produce better long-term outcomes for patients, but that doesn't necessarily mean eradicating the cancer completely.
And our kind of classic idea of treating cancers was to find the magic bullet. But what we find, especially with metastatic disease, is that when we treat continuously with a drug, that cancer will initially respond and then recur.
Using the theory of evolution, Dr. Anderson and his team in Moffitt's Integrated Mathematical Oncology Department use math formulas to determine the best course of treatment that allows a patient to control the cancer and actually live with the disease.
Basically, by applying treatments in a smart way, which could mean switching them on and off, we can control that cancer much more like a chronic disease. And so that leads to a situation of tumor control rather than eradication, but it potentially gives us a much more longer-term strategy for metastatic disease.
This form of adaptive therapy is tailored to each individual patient and is improving quality of life for those taking part in a clinical trial.
We've been able to control those cancers in 11 patients now for almost 2 years.
Since the patients are receiving a smaller dose of medication, Dr. Anderson says they have a higher quality of life and fewer medical costs. Just some of the benefits of controlling cancer, one equation at a time.
And we're back. All right. Thank you all for sticking with me on that. That was the first time I did that, so I think it went smoothly for most people. Let's go on. So they're doing phenomenally interesting things at Moffitt. In their oncology ward, they were talking about how they were really using math to see how they could keep tumors at bay. And that's really the Achilles tendon here. How do they always keep them at bay using the exact amount of medicine that doesn't have harmful side effects for the patient? And they believe that if they continue on this path forward, that's how they're going to improve patient outcomes and ultimately cure the disease. Here's another example of how digital data is exchanged during a care episode. This is an example of how patient monitoring can be used to improve patient lives. This is like the example I was saying about the bed stores. This is where many different players are involved, and data needs to be exchanged between the players in almost a real-time fashion in order to improve the life. Now, device data is collected and it's combined with other patient data, which is then used in a variety of algorithms to monitor changes in the patient's condition. Next, we'll have real-time alerts, which are sent using clinical communication and collaboration systems. And as the patient data is collected, it becomes part of the patient's clinical record to help further drive algorithms. These algorithms then trigger alerts with cognitive capabilities to prescribe an action. And in this example, it's the dispatching of an ambulance, but it could be so simple as the recommendation in the patient portal if an alert is critically low. It could even be an alert on a cell phone. And real-time simulation awareness algorithms can combine multiple data inputs to really determine the best care for the patient. This looks very simple when we have it up here, but in reality, because of all the different sources, formats, and players, it can become very difficult. Each healthcare system has different file formats, has different systems and different formats, as well as the ambulance driver and and as well as the app that the patient has and the patient portal. So this is an example of data governance and also of ETL and knowing how to transform and load this data in real time so that all of the data can be accessible to all players at the same time. Here's an example of this for both healthcare payers and providers. This is a use case where it's how do you prevent spinal surgeries from occurring? And so the first is you have to ask that question, and then the answer is you do predictive analytics on it. You can identify which patients are most prone to spinal surgery and intercept and treat them before they have to go surgery, which is both dangerous and expensive for the payer and the provider. I mean, the ultimate goal should always be trying to do other less invasive procedures before it would get to that. And the way we did it was there's a dozen or more variables that really influence whether or not a patient will require spinal surgery. And these can be taken from everything from doctor's notes, which would have to be scanned, and then a little NLP on top of that in order for you to make use of that data, and then put into a logical regression, so it would be able to predict the probability of whether it will occur or not. Now, again, in order to have those dozen variables, data must be collected. Data must be transformed into a format that is usable. It could be doctor's notes or audio that has to be changed. It needs to know how to take both structured and unstructured data formats and put them into a usable format in order for you to do this. And so the information architecture has to also be solid beneath this. Now, this is from Gartner, actually, and I love this. This is by 2022, the first US medical malpractice case involving a medical decision made by an advanced AI algorithm will have been heard. And the reason why it will be heard is the best part. It's because it's not because it produced an incorrect diagnosis, rather because the failure to use an algorithm that was proven to be more accurate and reliable than the human alone. Now, we're not saying that AI is going to replace humans in healthcare, but what we are saying is that there are various indicators and alerts and systems that AI could power that will enhance and enable and empower the humans in order to provide better healthcare. Could you imagine your mother or other loved one is in one healthcare system that fails to detect something that another healthcare system easily detects all the time? And saves lives. They always give the example of sepsis, for example, but there's lots of other examples out there. And as we have more data sources and as the math gets more solid, we're going to have more and more of these models that can help us predict when there will be a problem with a given patient and how to solve it before it gets there. And again, just like Ed Marx said, if you don't embrace data-driven medicine, you'll not only be left behind and become obsolete, but you'll be endangering people's lives. And bad data is literally killing people. So we need to have a solid data infrastructure in order to do so. Now I'm going to move on to the challenges. And one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is that, first of all, we're talking about human lives here. You know, if you make a mistake with the coding of GPS-based applications, it'll add a couple minutes to your commute home. But if you do this with health data, it can alter a human being's life. And data-driven medicine is a monumental feat because of what we saw before about all the data sources. And also, poor data quality, right? And that goes back to Doug Laney's 3 Vs. This is what about the quality of the data? And again, the larger the volume of the data, the more the quality of the data will be in question. You need to have proper data governance, you need to have proper systems to ensure that data quality will be checked and the veracity of the data is in fact there. Multiple sources and formats, like we talked about, and this hinders the time to insight for the data. How do you actually get to this data? Are you talking about months that you have to wait, or are we talking about minutes or even seconds to understand this? And that's a data architectural solution that you would need to have there in order to solve those challenges. And of course, privacy, security regulations and restrictions, which is one of the largest in healthcare. And data consumption. How do we make use of this data after we do all of the above? Now, bad data in, bad data out. We all know this, but what do we do about it? I mean, there are signals that the healthcare industry might be getting better at proactively managing data quality, but historically it has been one of the biggest excuses that medical professionals have used for discounting the use and value of data and information. You know, many doctors that have risen through the ranks in healthcare organizations and are now the CDO or CIO or other data leaders, I've heard before that they don't really believe in data the way we do. And they point to the quality of the data as the reason. And we agree that the data does have to be good, but the potential is still there for these huge use cases. And we can't let data, the poor quality of the data rather, get in the way of our progress. And of course, data silos. There's some statistics that I've heard that 85% of data in an organization is siloed. And data silos, as we all know, are data that is not shared across an organization. It's either in one department or even by one person, and it's not shared across. However, in all organizations, especially in healthcare, there's a huge overlap in data needs. So if we look at this one, these are just many of the functions that in one healthcare system, and they rely on the same data. We see clinical pathways, quality metrics, and payer strategies, and how they all overlap and need similar data sources. But without a proper governance or a proper architecture behind this, how could they possibly be made available in the right format and in a single window pane of analytics to the right shareholders to make some use of this? And again, interoperability, if we go back to this slide, is one of healthcare's most persistent challenges. And with every additional app and every additional service, there's just more and more types of data. Advanced analytic applications require aggregating data from multiple sources and formats. And sources and formats, like you see here, include structured and unstructured data. That could be voice and video streams, HL7, CDA, CCDA, claims, lab data, radiology, other transcribed reports, and the list goes on. And even with the best interoperability standards and compliance, healthcare will always have a unique challenge because of the complexity and volume of healthcare data types and sources. So to make use of this is a mountain that we have to overcome. In addition, there's to the challenges that we saw before, we need to have people that are going to be able to go to clinical trials. So specifically for challenges for that, we're going to need to identify small subsets who are going to respond to the targeted therapy. They're going to need to access tissue for molecular profiling. They're going to need to access clinical data for modeling to respond to the treatment and to recontact patients to enroll in clinical trials. And this is challenging just in and of itself. And if the data is siloed, it makes it nearly impossible to do this because all of these items require an organization's data to be shared throughout. Now, I've highlighted in gray, if you see here, this is all the trial matching from the previous slide. It relies on those different organizations. I'm sorry, those different parts from the same organization. And you can see that if you don't share among the different colorways, then there's no way that a clinical trial could ever work. And if we don't have clinical trials, then pretty much there's no empirical evidence and we can't really prove our hypotheses, and then we can't really make any progress in what we're doing with precision medicine. And the last one is privacy. We always are very cognizant at Caserta of privacy and security regulations and restrictions. We have deep domain expertise dealing with this with our healthcare clients. And a lot of it is because even though, all of us share on social media very intimate, gory details of our lives, we still think, and rightly so, that our health data is sacred. And there are laws that prevent us from sharing this in ways that, let's just say, if all of the data of all of us was completely open and transparent, it's very likely that we would have been able to make leaps and bounds already in our healthcare because of the data. That being said, there are ways to work around this, and there are ways to work, in order to always be HIPAA compliant, whether that be de-identified data, whether that be data in swim lanes that certain people in certain situations can see the data, and in other situations cannot, but always to be compliant of that. So how are consumers going to work with this data, right? So we have all this data. If there's not a single pane of glass for someone to use, then it's a lot more challenging. We have to know how is an analyst at the end of the day going to take this patient and use it, right? And this has to do with predefined dashboards and KPMs over time. We're going to want interactive reports of aggregate counts, as well as query tools for cohort identification. And of course, an ability to create and export patient level data sets. Single pane of glass is crucial for the consumption of that data, and that's a huge challenge at many healthcare organizations today. Bear with me a moment. I think that slide was out of place. All right, so recommendations. First off, you cannot boil the ocean. You know, I've heard this so many times, but it's so true when talking about data. We've talked about a number of opportunities, but they rely on huge barriers to entry in data infrastructure, namely the architecture, governance, and interoperability. So if you start with a use case and move on from there, a firm like Caserta can help you get there and tell you exactly what are the steps necessary for that given use case. I mean, the opportunities of data-driven medicine are dizzying, but we cannot do it at once. And all serious initiatives need to consider data dexterity as an integral capability to enable agility to source, curate, analyze, and consume data. We really want to achieve data liquidity with a solid data infrastructure to build all initiatives on. If data cannot be both shared, consumed, and managed, then that's a problem, because we're going to want to be, sharing this with other organizations in that digital healthcare ecosystem that we just talked about. So when we're talking about your architecture might look like this. It probably looks like this, but it should look something more like this. And this is just an example of a sample architecture that would have a curation and enrichment hub. And that's really to simplify access to the data and reduce the complexity, the time and complexity of managing this data, and achieve faster time to value. Implementing a curation and enrichment hub, however, will really require the healthcare organization to rethink traditional data integration methods and strategies. Like I said about the one person at the conference that I was at, she said they currently have 53 EHRs, and trying to put something into a given structure like this that would take those 53 EHRs and be able to make sense of it is really a huge initiative that they're working on right now. Now, in order to do that, existing ETL tools may need to be replaced or entire ETL routines re-engineered. And it's not an insignificant undertaking for a healthcare organization to do. That's a perfect example of where Caserta would come in and be able to see what the problem is, to have a roadmap, to suggest it with actionable insights, and then even do the architecture and engineering for the healthcare organization so you guys can focus on providing the best care for the patient. But this is a necessary foundation of a digital healthcare strategy, and it really enables better care across the entire digital ecosystem. So how do you get started? So number one, the best practice is to document your current data integration strategies and tools in use. Then you want to inventory new and expanding healthcare ecosystem of data exchange, interoperability, and integration needs. Understand what is out there. What does the entire ecosystem look like that you can really leverage and really take advantage of? And then you're going to want to gather metadata and begin to document the characteristics of the data domains in your enterprise. And finally, conduct a gap assessment. And again, that's one of those places where Caserta really excels. If you need an external player to validate your assumptions, to see what's going on. And finally, you're going to want to take all that you collected and put it together into your roadmap and strategy. And to develop an enterprise strategy for analytics, you're going to want greater standardizations of definitions using data capture and reporting, leading to improved accuracy of information used for your decision making. This is where data governance is crucial, especially because of mergers and acquisitions, when there are many different players within one single healthcare system, each with their own definitions of data. I think I heard there was one case where date was used 18 different times. Was it claim date? Was it close date? And this is a classic example of where governance and definitions are critical for that. And the next is efficiency. People, time, and money, which you can gain from centralized strategies for data abstraction, warehousing, access to analytics, and reporting. And an elevated sophistication of analytics and value of data assets through cross-disciplinary collaboration. That goes back to the slide that we were talking about before of different parts of an organization that really need to work together towards the common goal. And of course, the overlap in types of data required for analytics across the organization. We need to cut down those data silos and have the data available. And again, this has to be HIPAA compliant, and there are ways to ensure that it is through different swim lanes and an architecture that does provide for that. This is an example of digital data dexterity throughout organization and also other types of organizations, which you could call a digital care delivery network. So this is a framework that really depicts the types of data that need to fluidly move in order for it to work effectively. This example represents the dominant activity in the healthcare ecosystem where healthcare providers, payers, and life science companies really converge in creating value for the patient, which is what we're really all here to do. And it demands dexterity. If this doesn't work in real time or near real time, it will fail because the data will be stale, it will not be appropriate, it will not give the insight that it needs, and poor data in, poor data out. So this is a little bit about what we're also doing at Caserta. This goes back to what I was talking about Doug Laney, the father of Infonomics, and also the guy who coined the 3 V's of big data. You know, it's funny. I just heard him deliver the keynote at the TDWI conference in Vegas last week, and he likes the number 3 because for big data it was volume, variety, and veracity, and for Infonomics he does the 3 M's, which is monetize, measure, and manage data as a real world asset. So this is these are different models at Caserta that we work with Doug to really say, how do we value data? What is data worth? What could you do with this data? And these are different models that we use in order to take together, I think it's more than 250 different data points in order to properly determine what a client's data is really worth and how to monetize, manage, and measure that data. Again, always being completely compliant and always deeply understanding the domain-specific needs of healthcare. And this is an example of the corporate data pyramid that we talk about with data governance. This goes back again to how do we build an architecture that really governs the data in a way that we can take data and treat it in a way that still maintains its full fidelity and doesn't lose any of the metadata and other parts, and then at the end finally feed clean, fully governed, trusted data to necessary stakeholders and also to applications. This is a model that really does enable us to have clean data out so that the data could be trusted and better used. And here's specifically data governance for analytics. These are recommendations that we have for organizations, really to have different governance in practice in order to ensure that the data is governed, that data can be used appropriately, and the same across an organization with the right definitions and is managed properly. And one of our most important takeaways today is that technology is a tool. It is not a magic cure-all. And I've heard this from many different people that I've spoke to, not just in healthcare, but also at different companies. Even last week, I was talking about at TDWI. Data is a tool, but people need to adopt it. And if they're not going to adopt it, it's not going to succeed. You need to have cross-functional teams of doctors, scientists, nurses, paired with tech teams, as well as external teams like Caserta who can extract value from data. This is an example of what I'm talking about. These are forces for change, but these are also forces resisting change. And this is about people. A lot of it goes back to fear. Are they going to be trained in the new technology? Are they going to be trained in this data? Are they going to know what they're doing? Are they going to be brought on board? And in order to do that, you really have to reskill the people to know what is going on, involve everybody, the necessary stakeholders, figure out who are the leaders, who are your influencers inside the organization that are really going to become your champions. And Caserta does a wonderful job of this. We really try to have acceptance of the data project in order for it not to fail. Because if it's not widely adopted, then chances are that it will fail. All right. And that's all we have for today. Thank you all and have a great day.